What's up, everyone? Mark here. Welcome to the Prepared Pantry, episode 16. Today we are doing brownies again because mistakes were made. So if you saw the recent video where we did the original Toll House brownies, we tested 6 different varieties that used shortening and butter and different kinds of cocoa. The ones that used the baking chocolate, however, were grossly mismeasured. So that's my fault. In fact, if I had read the package, I would have seen, and it just goes to show, for all the research that you do and obtaining old cookbooks and things, trying to validate old recipes, simple conversion error because I didn't read the back of the package. So the mistake that I made, and it was noticeable in the original video, was that I didn't use nearly enough chocolate. I used about 1/4 as much chocolate as there should have been. So the recipe called for 2 squares of baking chocolate. I took that to be 2 pieces of chocolate broken off this bar, sort of the way segments break off of a Hershey bar. Well, it turns out 4 of those pieces are 1 ounce or 1 square of chocolate. So where I only used 2 for the recipe, I should have used 8. So again, that's my fault, but because of that, we're going to go ahead and remake the baking chocolate versions of the recipe today. We're not going to retest everything, but we are going to make the brownies again in butter and in shortening. And in the meantime, I did also obtain a copy of the original Toll House cookbook from the 30s, and I can verify that my family's brownie recipe that we've said is the Toll House recipe is in fact the Toll House recipe. A couple of differences that I will point out. This specifies the 350 to 400 degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes, and it says to cut in squares or strips when cooled a little. My family's recipe has always said cut them immediately out of the oven. So I think we're going to wait a little bit and we'll cut them once they're cooled this time. So one of the other differences that I did find interesting, although we're not going to test it here today, is in the equivalence this for that section of the actual same cookbook that the recipe appeared in. It gives a conversion of chocolate and cocoa. 1/3 of a cup of cocoa equals 1 square or 1 ounce of chocolate. Again, they're telling me right there that that's an ounce. Add 1/2 tablespoon of shortening. So the ratio that was given for the shortening cocoa conversion in my recipe, or my family's recipe, or my family's version of the recipe from this book, was 3 tablespoons of cocoa equals 1 square, along with the addition of 2 tablespoons of either butter or shortening, depending which fat you were using. We are not testing that today at any rate, because we're not using cocoa. Both of the batches we're making today are going to be butter and shortening using the baking chocolate. So before we get started with our redo, I want to take a moment to thank you all again so much for your continued support of the channel. I know some of you are actually watching these videos religiously when they come out on Mondays and Fridays. To those of you, share the channel, get more people involved. Either share the link or pick a favorite video and share that, and help me get more people subscribed. If you're watching and you're not subscribed yet, please do. Click the red button down below or the watermark over in the corner. And when you do, make sure you hit the bell icon to get a notification every time I have a new video out. You can also follow me at Mark Burma on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All right, let's get to the remake. Okay, so not like we haven't done this 6 times before. We have 1 cup of sugar. We have 2 eggs. We have 1/2 cup of flour, cake flour in this case, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. We have 2 ounces or 8 pieces of baking chocolate, and we have 1/3 of a cup of shortening. So the first thing we're going to do is crack our eggs. Beat a little bit. And we're going to add the sugar. Get that combined with the egg. And the vanilla. Okay, now the shortening and the chocolate. need to get melted in the microwave. Get the chocolate whisked into the shortening until it is completely dissolved. Okay, I think we are good. And now we can add the flour. And because this is a shortening version, we have greased our pan with shortening. Into the pan. Okay, spread this in the pan. Okay, I'm going to set this one aside and rinse repeat with the butter version. Okay, buttered pan, 2 eggs. Okay, baking chocolate and 1/3 of a cup of butter. I'm going to melt this. Okay, and again we will stir to make sure that the chocolate is fully dissolved. I think we're good. And the flour. And again, it seems like the butter-based brownie batters are more of a flowable batter. Okay, so both pans are going to go into a 350-degree oven for about 25 minutes. And when they're done, we'll let them cool a little bit before we cut them, and then we'll be doing the taste test. All right, the brownies are out of the oven and cooled. They ended up going for about 30 minutes. And we are ready to cut. got my nice glass of milk here. I'm going to go with the shortening first. I think that's very similar. It's very similar to the cocoa powder. I don't know. I think cocoa powder might have a slight edge. It's not that these are bad by any means, but I think a little bit more chocolate flavor comes through in the cocoa powder, which kind of makes me wonder if I used the heavier, more cocoa powder per chocolate square conversion that the book that this recipe comes from gives. That might be an interesting result, especially if I use less fat, as it also suggests. Interesting because the conversion of 3 tablespoons plus 2 tablespoons fat for the cocoa conversion seems to be pretty standard. I found that in a number of different books. It's not like it came, out of nowhere, and my family was just using it for some reason. But let's try the butter, which I expect to be a little bit more rich. That is good. But it's good. It's good in the same way that the other ones with butter were good. It's got a more rich buttery flavor. Also, again, the recipes that include butter, I'd used salted butter. Same thing was the case here. And that's the only salt in the recipe. And salt does tend to help bring out the chocolate flavor in a recipe. So maybe not so surprised. So I think the overall takeaway here is that the butter, by and large, results in a more richer, deep flavor. I think that's partly a function of the butter and partly a function of the salt in the salted butter. The texture is a little bit different too. They're usually a little bit more, I don't want to say oily, but there's a moistness to them. These tend to be a little bit more dense and dry with the shortening. And the shortening ones still seem to get this sort of crusty, kind of flaky, tasty, I don't want to call it a skin. It's not really a skin, but a little flaky layer on top that you don't get. You just kind of get a crackly bubble texture on the butter version. I don't know, both really good in their own right. I don't have a problem with either one of them. More brownies, more carbs that I don't need around the house, but I'm sure I'll find some willing neighbors to take some of these off my hands. Guys, I think that's it for another one. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.